is going to have to shoot it before the shot clock runs out. Oh, my.
Farokhmanesh at three.
Good! You can't be serious with that shot.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. Just about a day after episode 13, we're on to episode 14. I had already planned on doing an episode today previewing the Sweet 16 with Arizona and BYU in action tomorrow night on Thursday. But got to hit the news right up top. I talked yesterday a lot about Niko Medved leaving for Minnesota, kind of what I felt was going to be next for the Rams program. And exactly what I thought was going to happen. Maybe not this quickly, but I think it's the right move to do it this quickly. Ali Farokhmanesh, as you can tell with the special intro video at the top with his famous shot against Kansas in the 2010 NCAA tournament, Ali Farokhmanesh has been promoted from associate head coach to head coach. He was the interim head coach for 2 days-ish, and now he takes over full-time. Fully deserving for Ali. He's been at CSU for 7 years. He's been with Niko Medved for 8. Niko originally hired him when he got the Drake job back in 2017. Ali at the time was the director of player development for Tim Miles, another former CSU coach at Nebraska. Ali got his coaching start at Nebraska under Tim as a GA, worked his way up to director of player development. And now has been with CSU for 7 years and has had opportunities to leave, as I've talked about many times on this podcast, turning down, first-time coaching opportunities at lower-tier programs to stick around with the Rams, and now he gets rewarded for that by getting to take over for Niko Medved and continue what the Rams have been building the last 7 years, because it's been a great run for them. 3 tournaments in 4 years is only the second time that's ever happened in program history. And now the most logical transition is to hand the reins over to Ali, the guy who's been the lead recruiter, running the offense. He's been huge in developing a lot of the guys, whether it was Isaiah Stevens previously, Kyan Evans currently. Guys like Nick Clifford got a lot better during their time at CSU because of Ali. So just makes total sense to promote him, and it's exactly what I would have done if I was John Weber. And that's the conclusion CSU comes to a couple days into this search with. Very clearly, there were a lot of people interested, and they should be, because CSU has quickly become a very attractive mid-major job. And if there wasn't someone like Ali in place, CSU would have had some pretty good candidates to choose from with previous head coaching experience. But it just makes, like I said, all the sense in the world to promote Ali and let him get his chance here to be a first-time head coach. And I think he's going to do really well. Like I said, he's been killing it on the recruiting trail for the Rams for the last couple of years, whether it's high school guys. They really like this point guard they've got coming in, JoJo McIver from Texas, whether it's Kyan Evans or, like I said, Nick Clifford out of the portal, all these guys that they've gotten to come to CSU in recent years that have been so key in fueling the last couple of years, but most importantly this past year, the kind of surprise tournament run where CSU at the end of the year becomes one of the top 15 or 16 teams in the country. Heartbreaker. We talked about it yesterday. Heartbreaker to lose to Maryland and just miss out on the Sweet 16. But this program's in a good spot, and I think going forward with Ali, you can feel about as good as you did a couple of days ago, despite Niko leaving for Minnesota. Opportunity he couldn't pass up, and I think he'll do well at Minnesota. And I think Ali will be able to continue what they've been building in Fort Collins. I think this really helps them keep as many guys as possible too. The portal opened 2 days ago, and it's a little bit surprising to see none of the players in the portal just yet. I thought Kyan Evans, not a knock on him at all. I just thought he would be one of the first guys, just because his price tag really increased during that weekend in Seattle with the big game he had against Memphis. He played pretty well against Maryland as well, against some really veteran guards that the Terps have. So it felt like there were going to be a lot of high major programs in his DMs or contacting his agent if he's got one to to get him to jump in the portal because he could command some money elsewhere, and same for plenty of other guys. But nobody's done that so far, and now the Rams will probably be active in the portal as well, trying to add some guys, like I said, to replace Nick Clifford, replace Jalen Lake in the starting lineup, and then the guys like Bowen Bourne and Ethan Morton, who are really key seniors off the bench too. They'll need to replace those guys, but they've got a good core if they're able to keep it intact with Kyan Evans, Rashawn Bemba, Jalen Crocker Johnson, all going to be juniors next year. All got starting experience under their belt now. And it'll be interesting to see what this Rams team looks like and see what Ali can do here in the spring with putting the roster together, and then in the summer as they get to working with these guys and getting ready toward next season. So, Ali will be introduced later this week. I'll be there for that, and we'll have plenty of coverage of what CSU's have been going to be up to in the offseason. So just wanted to hit that at the top before we get into the rest of the episode. And we've got a guest on today to talk about the Sweet 16, and it is a returning guest, and that is my good friend Caleb Wilfinger, who was on on Selection Sunday as we broke down the bracket, and now Caleb is back after the first weekend of the tournament to preview weekend number 2. Caleb, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me again. The tournament always flies by, and feels like we were just talking and trying to break down so many first round, like second round games, and now we've already played 40 something games at this point, and we're going to be we're in the business end of the tournament now, is what some call it. So not a ton of surprises, as I'm sure we'll get to, but some pretty enticing matchups this week for sure.
Yeah, I think we both agreed that it could be pretty chalky this year, but I felt like that would lead to some really good games later on in the tournament. People have been complaining about lack of Cinderellas so far and lack of big time upsets, but I do think we're set for some really good games this weekend, and then whatever we get in the Final Four, I think it's going to be pretty special stuff. Although I think there have been some really good games so far too. Like, I don't think the first weekend was a complete dud. Obviously, I was at one of those games with CSU and Maryland. I thought Oregon, Arizona right after that was another really high level game. So just kind of, has anything stuck out to you so far? Just trends or any games that really you were dialed into that caught your interest that were super exciting?
Yeah, I mean, those two games in Seattle on Sunday were probably the best games of round 2, just back to back. So, I mean, amazing. You got to really experience them both. That's as good of a place as ever. But even outside of that, I think you saw some of even though the chalk held for the most part, you did see some teams kind of in that short turnaround second round setting struggle a little bit at large points of the game. Look at Auburn against Creighton. Their whole kind of vibes and everything were off really the whole tournament until that second half against the Jays, and they found a little something. Florida with a major scare against UConn, who played, finally, I think the season played really above their seed line and showed their preseason, top 10-ish potential, or what some prognosticators projected them to be. Even you look at, St. John's going down, which is the major upset, so to speak, of the tournament. And that Arkansas team that didn't put it together until late in conference play really show up and make a statement and make a couple of outside shots barely, but even though St. John's couldn't do that. So that was, even in some of the chalkier games, Houston just having an absolute war with Gonzaga when it looked like they were going to pull away. So while, I understand the complaints about chalk and this and that, we have seen some really good games, and it's going to lead to a lot of heavyweights playing each other over the next 4 days for a chance to make the Final Four, which is all you really want out of the tournament. You want great basketball, and I think we're going to get great basketball.
Just quickly before we move on to previewing these two Sweet 16 games, just any lingering takeaways for you from Colorado State's season? Just Niko Medved leaving, Ali Farokhmanesh getting promoted, like I talked about at the top. Just kind of anything jump out to you from? I know you enjoyed watching this Rams team from afar all season. Just kind of, what was it like watching it come to an end, and general thoughts on where the program's at?
What a great couple of years for Colorado State, right? I mean, for the most part, you look at even going back to 2022, was it when they made the tournament?
Yeah,
played Michigan.
Yep.
Medved the Mountain West, fortunately, is a conference with a lot of great coaches. I think we both can agree on that. And Medved, to me, is right up there with the Dutchers of the world. Leon Rice at Boise, and obviously, Richard Pitino at New Mexico. Who knows how much longer that will be, but.
Well, New Mexico, he's gone now. Richard Pitino is going to Xavier, which I
missed that news. Live reaction on the podcast for me.
That happened last night because I recorded the episode last night, and at the end I mentioned I don't want to talk too much about the transfer portal stuff until that kind of the dust settles from that. But I did mention Donovan Dent going in the portal for New Mexico, and literally like 10 minutes after I posted the episode, Richard Pitino was hired at Xavier. So there you go. And
I've been so in the weeds of breaking down this week's games. I just must have missed all the notifications that came up. But anyway, he had done an excellent job with that New Mexico program.
Mountain West, you're right, has had a lot of really good coaches. Gerald Cahoon is sticking around, which is good for the league.
Right.
You've had plenty of good coaches.
Absolutely, even at some of the smaller programs. So you look at what Medved has been able to do. I think outside of the San Diego State Final Four run, I think he's been second to none. I mean, taking this program, and Colorado State has just been this season in particular, a super fun team. I talked about on the show last week that the fluidity of their offense I've always liked watching, and he really coaches them up very well in special time and score situations. And we saw that in the game against Maryland, where the Maryland Avalanche kind of comes after it had been kind of pushed away, and Colorado State did a great job to fight back and retake the lead. Maryland seizes the lead in an Avalanche quickly after that Neat Clifford turnover, fumble out of bounds. That was a brutal sequence. And to Medved's credit and the team, he picks his team up. He draws something up. They hit 2 huge shots to tie it, and then of course the go-ahead 3 was a great play. Caught Maryland napping, and that's emblematic of a good coach, is how you can execute in those type of situations. And even on the final play, everyone knew Queen was getting it. I thought it was phenomenal defense anyway, given the situation.
They had their best defender on him. There was nothing really more than.
And there was no foul. There was no foul. It was straight up. A great player makes a great shot. It is what it is. It's brutal. It's a tough end to a season for a team that. I spoke about it during our post-selection show. They had been playing like a legitimate top 15, 20 team, if not better. But at least over the course of this winning streak they were on, they were playing like a team that deserved to be in the Sweet 16.
I think they're still 15th in Bart Torvik's rankings since you started at February 1st. They are 15th in the country. So
they were,
a 6-week
I think,
sample size at this point. Yeah,
I think they were 8th before they played Maryland or something like that. So just an unbelievable stretch from a team that in non-conference was still figuring things out, and an excellent coaching job for Medved. And I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to do great things going forward. And I think he also, though, to his credit, set the program up like you had talked about in your intro for Ali Farokhmanesh, who I agree is a great successor. He set Farokhmanesh up well for at least the next year or two. And then from there on out, it's going to be up to this staff and the administration in general. But I think Colorado State is going to be well set up to compete in this Mountain West and beyond, and whatever conference realignment takes us for years.
They've only got 1 year left, and then they're going to the Pac-12. So
and then I was going to say the new Pac-12 it could be Frankenstein, more teams in. Who knows? I don't even want to say anything too definitive because something might happen tomorrow with a new conference commissioner or something. But I think Colorado State is well set up to succeed, and their fans should still be excited even after the crushing disappointment of not winning that game.
All right, well, let's move on to previewing this weekend's games. Obviously, this podcast, we've got 2 teams left that we cover. I want to start with BYU and Alabama just because BYU has had a longer layoff. That game against Wisconsin has a little bit more of a shelf life, and they play first. That's the first game tomorrow night. I think it's a little after 5 o'clock Mountain Time. I forget what channel it's on, but that's the first game.
I believe CBS.
Probably sounds about right. Yeah, I think we're done with True TV after the first weekend, so I think it's all.
Everybody
CBS,
can forget
TBS,
about it on their in their. You don't have to save that channel anymore.
All right, let's talk about this BYU Alabama game. Just first off, we had talked about that VCU matchup first, and just kind of how tough that was. How impressed were you by that game in particular for the Cougs, and then them kind of taking the momentum from that and carrying it over into the Wisconsin game, which they led for, I think, all but 30 seconds of that game. Wisconsin obviously makes it close at the end, but BYU just had such an impressive weekend here in Denver. Probably the best story that we had from the games at Ball Arena. What stuck out to you about what BYU did?
Yeah, I mean, I was extremely impressed. Like I think a lot of other people were, and BYU, as we had spoke about a few weeks ago, was a team that you and I both had been impressed and had been on
Yeah.
board with over the last like month and a half or so. Really, ever since late January, they had turned things around. This is a team that's playing as well as almost anybody. And VCU, I thought that was a difficult matchup just with VCU's length and their press and their ability to guard. And BYU neutralized that by saying, well, we're just going to make shots, which is what we always do. And they make shots. And I also have to give a lot of credit to Kevin Young for the insertion of Mag in the starting lineup. You know, it happened earlier in the regular season, but Keita as well. Both of them, they give them a little bit of an edge, you know, defensively, which I think I alluded to before the tournament. And that showed up in a major way against VCU, which is a team that plays with a lot of edge, you know, a lot of attitude, will turn you over and make things difficult. And BYU looked right at home, and VCU was the one that looked uncomfortable. And I think also the location, the elevation played a role in that. Fast forward to the Wisconsin game, up and down game. BYU is so comfortable in that type of game script. And Wisconsin, you know, playing their fifth game in 9 days or something, you could tell that
it would have been like their sixth game in like a week and a half. Yeah, at that point,
yeah, they were pretty worn down, and BYU was more than willing to take advantage of them, you know, on the perimeter. Richie Saunders, again, you know, we had spoke about him on the last time we talked on this podcast, but one of my favorite players in the country, played out of his mind. You had great contributions up and down the bench, and credit to Young, the staff, and the team that when Wisconsin made that run late and it really looked dicey, you get you know the ball is going to Tanji. You put your best defender on him. He does one of the best individual defense jobs we've seen all tournament for sure. Forces a bad shot. Tanji wanted the foul. You're never getting that. And it was a tremendous – it was very interesting that BYU, they won that game with their offense. But when they had to, they got a crucial stop. And I think that might give them a little bit more confidence heading into the matchup against an elite offense.
Yeah, that final possession was just incredible, just with how good Tanjay was in that game at getting to the line and getting to the rim and converting. Like he was so good in that game, John Tanjay. And I really hope he gets a shot to play in the league after the season he had. That was one of the best games he had all season. He had a bunch of big nights like that. But a lot of those big nights came when he made like 6 or 7 threes. And the game against BYU, he didn't really do that. He was getting into the teeth of the BYU defense, getting to the rim, converting, like I said, when he got there. But on that last possession, Mag and the whole BYU defense just kind of walls up and really takes away what Tanjay was looking to do and gets the stop when they needed it. But obviously the score is what it is, a 91-89 game. And now BYU, who's, like we said, has been one of the best offensive teams in the country, has to play a team that is just as comfortable playing their style as anybody else in Alabama. Is this just a game where it's first to 100, do you feel like?
Maybe. It is for the kind of people that follow along with this sort of thing. So the total is risen 4 points last time I checked since the open. You're now looking at 175.5 for the total on this game. And that is the highest in the tournament in a while. And for good reason, because this is definitely first to 90. Absolutely. Yeah. And then we'll see what happens after that. Even in a second weekend high pressure situation, there is going to be such a high pace between these teams. Both of these teams play at a top 20 pace, if I remember correctly. And they are more than willing to get shots up 10, 12, 13 seconds into the shot clock. And each team's going to have 4 shooters on the court at one time, if not more. And up and down. And there's going to be runs in this game. That's another thing I want to stress is if you're a BYU fan and Alabama gets up by 15 or something or 13, and don't despair, because there are going to be runs in this game where a team just hits 3 out of their last 4 3-point attempts, and all of a sudden the other team's taking a timeout, and everybody takes a deep breath and resets, and then we start running again. That's going to be so high pace, high total. Yeah, you're gonna have to hit double-digit threes, and you're gonna have to score 90 to win this game for sure.
Yeah, you look at, like I was talking about, if you look at the Bart Torvik's rankings since February 1st, BYU third in adjusted offensive of efficiency. Alabama is fifth. I think Alabama's top 5 in 2-point percentage from in that span. BYU is 21st, I think, in 3-point rate. It's one of those things where you got to expect a lot of shots to get up from either side, and BYU shot 46% from three as a team in the Wisconsin game. Got a bunch of contribution from guys off the bench. I mean, Trevenell had a really big game. He's the starter along with Richie Saunders. But it feels like Dallin Hall is the guy that's capable of going off in a given game. Dawson Baker, Boscovich, they've got all these guys off the bench that could really have a big impact on the game. But I do want to mention Yegor Demin and the weekend he had, particularly the VCU game, which may have been his best game of the season, one that NBA draft people were talking about. How impressed were you with what he did in the weekend in Denver, and how important is he going to be? And how good of a game do you feel like he could have against this Alabama defense that maybe doesn't have the size to match up with him as he's trying to be the lead playmaker for this BYU team?
He certainly, was very impressive, and a guy that you and I have liked and we're just hoping for a little bit more from in Big 12 play. So this was really encouraging, and some players kind of just need that. You go through the meat grinder of conference play, Big 12 especially. I mean, BYU played Iowa State and Houston back-to-back in the Big 12 tournament. Yeah. Little nicer to not have to play those defenses when you're comfortable in Denver. Like, I think it was a great situation for the whole team, but Demin really seen a benefit from that, arguably the most. And he looked confident, which is something that I wanted to see more from him, because he has the capability to be an exceptional playmaker, get 2 feet in the defense, make the right pass, have a good rapport with the bigs, set the high screen, hit the outside shot. Like, he can do all those things. It's just about like the mentality and the confidence with him, I think. So, and less turnovers, huge deal with minimizing turnovers, especially in this game when you're playing an Alabama team that likes to run, and they do turn you over and then they thrive on it. You talked about the backcourt. The size of Alabama's backcourt is pretty small from a starter's perspective. Like, if BYU is gonna hunt switches in the half court if they can, and that might be a thing where you try to target Holloway or Sears, who they're just going to be a lot smaller than a guy like Dedmon. So you're going to have the advantage to see over them. It'll be interesting if maybe he gets some stuff against like Philon or whatnot. You start getting into the athletes of Alabama, because they can play pretty big if they have Philon and Diabate and Amori at the rim. They have a lot of length and athleticism. Nelson. So it'll be interesting to see how he attacks the matchup. But I do think BYU is in a position to succeed as a team if he can just play within himself and minimize the mental mistakes that did really hurt them sometimes in conference play.
Yeah, I also think the front court matchup is really interesting in this game. You mentioned with BYU getting really good production from Kebakeda all season, really, but especially during Big 12 play. Fush Troyari is a really good big that you can have coming off the bench. And then obviously, despite the injury stuff with Grant Nelson, he is still one of the best front court players in the country. Just neither of these teams are great rebounding teams on really either end of the floor. So I really feel like if anybody, whoever is the more physical team, and it kind of always comes down to this in March, and is able to control the glass, which it really could go either way, could decide this game. I mean, how do you view Nelson versus those BYU bigs and how that matchup could sort itself out?
Yeah, I don't think Mark Sears is Alabama's MVP, but Grant Nelson is, I think, their most essential player. And I think you saw that in the Robert Morris game, where they had to break glass in case of emergency, bring him in the game, despite the fact that he was dealing with an ongoing injury at that point. They were trying to keep him out as a precaution. He comes in, really changed the identity of their offense, and then St. Mary's never really was in that game, and Nelson, I think, had a good amount to do with that, even though he didn't make a ton of shots. He just had a subtle impact on the game and how Alabama played on both ends. this matchup is interesting because he can stretch the defense. So I wonder how BYU is going to match up with if we're going to have to vacate the paint if Bama wants to go 5 out with him and they go smaller. This is an interesting schematic matchup. I don't think Oates is scared to take risks at all in that regard, But Nelson and Amori also played very well together against St. Mary's, so they might go, double big in that regard. And then I think BYU could be in trouble on the glass just because of Alabama. They're not as good of a rebounding team as they want to be. They want to crash the offensive glass. They do it a lot. I think they did it more effectively earlier in SEC play versus more recently. Their shot volume has not been very good, especially over the last month and a half or so. So BYU probably can win the shot volume battle. It's just a question of what do you do with those extra opportunities? Can you make this is a huge variance game? Can you win the shot volume battle with your bigs fighting and competing on the glass? And then, maybe you pinch in with some of your smaller players. Everybody crashes the offensive glass. And then can you get uncontested open threes and hit them in an interesting spot too in Newark, I believe, right at the Prudential Center. So a basketball, venue, at least back in the day, which I do think is a little better than having it at Lucas Oil Stadium. So I do think we'll see some better shot opportunities for these high variance 3-point shooting teams. But I think BYU, if they can just stay close in the rebounding category, they have an excellent chance to win this game.
It feels like such a cliche at this time of year, but it is always just going to come down to who makes more shots, especially in a game like this where both teams are intent on taking as many shots as possible, just with both teams kind of playing math ball, as we like to say. Yes. So just what's your prediction for this one? Who do you got winning?
This has been the hardest one all week for me to settle on. I'll be honest with you. I have a real strong take in all the games. I'm going to take Alabama, and I think they're going to win by 1 possession. Okay. I think this is a back and forth game. I actually think this is a game where BYU will have the lead late, and Bama has the last run in the game and wins. I'll say something to the effect of 92 to 89 or something along those lines. I do think it will be as high scoring as the prognosticators, indicate. So. But it wouldn't shock me at all if BYU won at all. Wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I'm picking BYU. I really do think they've just been on a roll lately, and I think it is going to be a close game. I agree with you. I think it's going to be in the high 80s with a minute or two to go. And I just trust by BYU in these late game situations. I think they're bad. It's weird to say that because Alabama went on the road and beat Auburn late in SEC play and had a number of really, really good wins. But I think BYU is battle tested, and I trust them a little bit more in these late game situations with the decision makers. And I think Richie Saunders is going to be a guy that could hit some really big shots down the stretch. And even if Alabama at that point is really trying to take him away, I think you've got Demon to play off of him, and then either Dallin Hall or Trevin Nell as well to hit some big shots. I just trust BYU in a tight situation. So I'm going to pick the Cougars. I think, like I said, it has been chalk, and I'm going to expect some more chalk this weekend. But I think BYU could surprise some people, and I think both these teams are capable of getting to the Final Four. I don't think either of them will, but I do think BYU is going to win this game. So. Moving over to the other game, Arizona and Duke, also tomorrow night. I think it's around 7:30 Mountain Time. That game is also I think it immediately follows. I think that game is also in Newark. Yeah, obviously. So that's going to immediately follow the BYU Alabama game, and Arizona coming off a blowout win over Akron in the first round, and then a close win over Oregon in the second round. They got off to a really slow start. I think they were down 19-4, 5 minutes in. Oregon jumped out to a big lead. Arizona storms back, takes lead in the first half, and then controls the game much the rest of the way until late. Oregon hit some shots to make it closer than maybe it should have been. What overall impressed you, Caleb, about Arizona's opening weekend performance in Seattle?
Well, I was pretty optimistic about Arizona heading into the tournament. I know we have both at least I spoke on the last episode we did about just how I had kind of turned a corner with Arizona, and I've been really impressed by their last month plus. And they kind of just did, especially, the Akron game, I was very impressed because that's a team that I've seen, plenty of Akron this year. I watched them in their conference tournament and some regular season games. That team can really score. They play with pace. I thought it was an interesting matchup for Arizona. And they just took care of business, handled it, played very in control, played with pace, made their shots, played well on the defensive end. You kind of felt that in the second game, Dana Altman against Tommy Lloyd was an advantage for Oregon. Just Altman, one of the best tournament coaches we have.
Oh, yeah.
And it looked like that early. It's going to be a letdown for Arizona on a short turnaround in Seattle. And they were just even more impressive by being resilient, things that we hadn't necessarily seen from this program in the last couple of years in the tournament to get to this point. And it wasn't just the shot making of Caleb Love, even though he turned in arguably his best game of the season at the most important time. The collective unit, the guards have all been playing a lot better. Awaka with, just being in all the right places at the right time, especially on the offensive glass. Vasar with his contributions. You can tell he's a little tougher and more confident than he was earlier in the season. So I'm really impressed with Arizona as a whole. They look the part of a top 15 team. And I think if you look over the last month at Torvik, they were, I think, 10th or 11th. So they look about that in my eyes. And
they're 11th in T rank since February 1st.
Since February 1st. So there you go. Yeah. Perfect. And, their reward for winning a tough, hard fought game is to travel across the country and play the best team in the country. So.
Yeah, it is a tough draw, but we have seen Caleb Love play well against Duke before and take them down in big spots. That's obviously going to be the big talking point going into this game, and I've talked many times about how much I'm just not the biggest fan of Caleb Love, but I mean, he's really, really turned it on lately, and it felt like every big shot he made in that game, he turned right over to me on the sideline and just pointed at me. It felt like he was just he was doing that in spirit with all those big shots he made, and that dunk he had at the end, he was all doing everything for Arizona, and I've just been so impressed. One of his most efficient games. I think he's been passing the ball a lot better lately. And this Arizona team now goes 8 deep, and I like all 8 guys, and I think that's the biggest thing going into this game. But I say that they're gonna need a big game from Caleb Love to win this, because that's still the recipe. I don't think he can have a bad game and they can win, especially against a team like Duke. And if they win, he has a chance to go down as an all-time great in terms of the NCAA tournament. This would have to be one of those performances. How do you view Caleb Love versus this Duke team, and just kind of what's the biggest thing you're looking to watch in this one?
Well, it's a really fun game because we've seen the teams play earlier this season, and that was a much worse Arizona team. I do want to stress it was in McHale. Duke won handily,
69-55. Late November.
It was kind of a rock fight. I do remember, and both teams were kind of finding themselves. I think that's fair to say about Duke as well. So I was doing some digging, and the last time that Duke played a team that was even remotely in Arizona's weight class, you would have to say it was Clemson at Little John in early February, and they lost that game. Clemson played a great game. Duke didn't play very well. It happens. But I was thinking before that, it had been since early December, since
when they played Auburn, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So this is an interesting test, not in the sense we know Duke is elite in pretty much all areas.
Yes.
If anything, I actually think their offense gets overlooked because how good their defense is.
They have the number 1 offense in the country since February 1st.
And it feels like people just talk about their defense. Yeah. So,
which is also 10th in the country.
Right. They're an elite team for a reason. But I think this is a noticeable step up in class on a big stage, where this season they haven't always succeeded. Now, I think they have a lot more confidence than they did in non-conference. I think the loss of Flag and winning the AC tournament was actually a really key thing for a lot of the ancillary pieces on this team. Their defense, though, they're not quite the same, I think, with some of the little injuries that they've had down the stretch, just in terms of, Jones and whatnot. But I think with this matchup, Caleb Love is an interesting cover for them, because I imagine Proctor and others. Mismatch will get the
Zion James,
Zion James
maybe.
probably will get the assignment.
Yeah.
But I'm not. It's I don't think that's an easy cover. And then you talk about Arizona, how you like all 8 guys. It's going to be the interesting part about this game is how will Tommy Lloyd handle like substitutions and things like that, where you have to always have rim protection because Duke is so elite at getting in the paint, whether it's flag, whether it's finding Malawach. I mean, they're excellent at getting what they want when they want. So all your guys have to be sharp. It's going to take all 8 Arizona players that play serious minutes at the not necessarily peak of their powers, but they all have to play well. And then somebody has to be at the peak of his powers, and that person is likely Caleb Love, who you alluded to has been so impressive recently. I totally agree. I think he's played within himself. He's passing has been the best I've ever seen it. Do I think he does enough in this game? I'm not sure. But I also think that this is going to be closer than some people expect.
I agree. I think it's depth versus star power. Like I said, I like all 8 guys. I think Arizona's wing rotation is maybe my favorite in the country. Maybe not the best, but my favorite in the country. Whether it's Carter Bryant, who could be a first-round pick if he leaves this year. Jane Bradley's really good. KJ Lewis is a monster when he's having a good game. You could include Trey Townsend in that if you want to as well. Or Del Orso has been a good offensive player at times. I really like all the guys they have, as options on the wing. I think that'll be interesting matchup, especially against guys like Knipple, Zion James, all the guys that Duke brings off the bench, like Isaiah Evans, who's just a shooter kind of guy.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how those guys match up. But the one thing I am really interested to watch is Awaka and Vesar versus Malawach, because Malawach has turned into maybe a top 5 pick with just a traditional.
He's unbelievable.
Just a ridiculous wingspan, 7'2", great defender. He's really, really good catching lobs on rolls. He's turned into an incredible player and a guy you could easily see being a long-time starter, but potential all-star in the NBA as well. I'll talk about him a lot in the lead up to the draft. But I was really impressed with Awaka the other day, especially against Oregon. Despite Nate Biddle not being an NBA prospect or anything, he's been one of the best offensive bigs in the country all season. And Awaka did a great job on both ends, especially on the glass. He had 5 offensive rebounds in the game, 14 total. They just needed every one of his minutes, and he was even more important than Vesar, who's come on strong recently. I just really think if there's a team that can limit Malawach and has the size you need to go up against a future top 5 pick and a future NBA center, I think Arizona could be that team with Awaka and Vesar. What do you like about this matchup?
Well, this is, there's nothing not to like about Malawach. The clips of him defending guards, it's just ridiculous. He's unbelievable.
NBA teams are salivating looking at that.
Yeah. That guy, and this is no discredit to Knipple, who has been awesome the whole season. I think Knipple was widely viewed as their second best player for a lot of the year.
Yeah.
And that wasn't without merit. He's awesome. He always is in the right place. Nothing bad to say. But watching them down the stretch in the conference tournament, you're like, Malawach is obviously the second best player. This guy is absurd. So with that said, this Awaka kind of, I don't want to say renaissance, but rise has really been since their latter part of the Big 12 season. I was super impressed in the conference tournament against Texas Tech and against Houston. He was all over the glass against Houston, and if you can bang with that team and get rebounds against them, then you're going to leave with, you've just been in a 12
No team fights harder on the glass than Houston. It's crazy.
He was in there with all those guys, getting offensive rebounds, getting putbacks, catching lobs, running the floor and making great plays on both ends. He was a big reason why Arizona really could have won that game. And that game, I think, will serve as good prep for this. Not that Houston has an individual player in the post as talented as Malawach. Really, nobody does. But he is kind of played that elite competition. In Arizona, they've played a lot of top, 8, top 10 teams between Texas Tech and Houston multiple times late in the season. Even Kansas playing Dickinson and Flory Badunga, who are, at least when they want to be, elite talents. Dickinson offensively, Flory defensively. So there's a lot of built-in battles that he's gone through, and I just talked about, and Vasar for that matter. And I also think that like not only has he gotten better from that, but Duke hasn't seen that. With due respect to Norchad Omier, he's more of like an offensive and a big and things like that. So I do think that Awaka, his physicality, his drive, his kind of stick-to-itiveness, I think are going to be invaluable for Arizona in this game. And I actually think that he's going to turn in a very good performance because he needs to, and Vasar as well to a lesser degree, if Arizona wants to keep this one within single digits.
All right, give me your pick for this one as well.
I think Duke wins by 6. That's my. It is a single digit game. Kind of will remind you of the Houston and Arizona game in the Big 12 tournament. I think this is going to be very similar. That game, Arizona had the lead with a couple minutes left, ended up losing by 8. But I think this one is like they're close all the way. They have a strong first half. Duke kind of has to get their legs under them against a competitor like this, and then Duke wins the second half and wins the game, hits their free throws late like all elite teams do. And they go to the Elite Eight to the surprise of no one. But I do think it's a close game.
I'm going Duke as well. I have them in the title game, so I'm not going to divert from that now. And it's been the Tyrese Proctor show so far for Duke, and I don't think that's going to continue. I wouldn't expect him to hit 7 of 8 threes tomorrow night, but I do think Con Knipple has a chance to have a big game, despite, like I said, me liking the athletes that Arizona has on the wings. I really do think Knipple could be in for a big night, whether it's Arizona just really overhelping off flag and guys getting open for shots, and Knipple being a guy that's more than capable of taking advantage of that. I think he could have his signature game in this lone year at Duke, and I do think the Blue Devils will advance, and I think they're on the path toward the title game, and we'll see how they get there, who they play along the way. But I as much as I've been super impressed by this Arizona team, and it was fun to watch them in person the other day, especially sitting courtside, like for that Oregon game, like it was really, really their size was something to see, and their athletes are just incredible. But I do think this Duke team, despite what you said, and I agree with it about them not really being tested in this manner yet, or at least in a long time, I do think they'll have enough talent in the end to beat Arizona. So that'll do it from this episode here. Caleb, thanks for coming back on to talk about the Sweet 16. Any other games nationally that you're looking forward to this weekend?
Well, I'm really hoping we get a Florida Texas Tech Elite Eight. Those are probably my 2 favorite teams in the country, and it's a shame they're in the same region. I was hoping they would play in the Final Four, but I would love that. And in the other regions, I think Houston and Auburn both emerge. I'll be interested to see how many points Michigan State falls behind before they come back and win against Ole Miss. We'll see how it goes, but we've got a lot of great teams, a lot of great coaches left. Should be an awesome next 2 weeks of the tournament, and maybe it'll distract people from not checking out some Rockies baseball. We're not too sure, but no. Happy opening day, everyone, as well.
Yeah, I will not be at Rockies opening day. I think Colorado has their pro day that same day, and I'll be there instead. So, I'm not going to be. I'll go to Coors Field when the Phillies are in town. I'll say that. So that'll be my baseball.
Long summer ahead. Long summer.
Yeah, there's a little bit of optimism in Rocky's world, but I'm trying to get everybody to realize that it's not going to be great again.
Baby steps, better than the Marlins. Baby steps, guys.
Hey, as long as they don't lose 100 games for a 3rd straight year, that's a win for the Rockies.
Yeah.
Which
go enjoy a night at the ballpark at Coors.
It's a great place to watch a game. It's the best outdoor bar in Denver, as I say. So that'll do it from this episode. Caleb, thanks again for coming on, and just recapping. Obviously, talked about Ali Farokhmanesh at the top, getting the Colorado State job, and then previewing BYU and Arizona in the Sweet 16. That'll do it from this episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, or hit that like button, and subscribe to my channel if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a comment. All that stuff is really helpful. So thanks again, everybody, for listening, and enjoy the weekend of basketball.